Hello again, everybody. You're very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Joining us on the programme now is the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Hello to Miss Nandy. I believe you've had a bit of problem with the traffic this morning. Hopefully everything OK now. I want to talk to you first of all about what's going on with Dominic Raab. Your thoughts?
I think this is yet another sign that you've got a Prime Minister who is not in control of his own party. We've got this extraordinary situation where the Prime Minister can't even say whether he was aware of allegations surrounding Dominic Raab. I have to say, as somebody who said on your show previously, Kay, that when I shadowed Dominic Raab, I heard a number of rumours about allegations of bullying within the department. It seems to me extraordinary that the Prime Minister wouldn't have heard about that and yet appointed Dominic Raab to the second highest position in British politics. It just shows that this is a Prime Minister who doesn't act until he's forced to. He's dragged to do it, kicking and screaming. He's far too weak to control his own party. And once again, the country is paying the price for this ongoing Tory psychodrama.
Curt but not a bully, says one very senior civil servant about Mr Raab, and suggests it's a group of mandarins trying to oust him.
I mean, I think that the sheer volume of people who seem to have come forward during this inquiry would suggest otherwise. The Prime Minister will, of course, say he's waiting for the outcome of that inquiry. But what it looks like to me is a Prime Minister who is frightened of taking action in case there are further repercussions in his own party. He's far too weak to stand up to people in his own cabinet. If he's too weak to stand up to people in his own cabinet, what hope is there that he's going to go out and fight for the interests of the British people?
OK, we were speaking to one of your colleagues yesterday. We've been speaking to a leader of the Civil Service Union today. They were saying if he stays in post while this continues, potentially those in his department are not safe. I mean, that's taking it too far, isn't it?
But we don't know. That's part of the problem. The Prime Minister won't disclose what he knew before he appointed Dominic Raab. He's got this lengthy investigation going on to deal with all of the allegations surrounding the Deputy Prime Minister in several different government departments that he served in. And in the meantime, we've got serious problems in this country, including in Dominic Raab's own constituency. We've uncovered figures recently showing that the number of people released on probation who go on to commit serious crimes is extraordinarily high at the moment. You've got problems on the railways, you've got problems on the roads, as I found out this morning. You've got problems in our schools and in our hospitals. And this is a government that just cannot focus on the job at hand because they're far too absorbed in their own internal squabbling. This has been going on for far too long. We don't need another change of Prime Minister. We need a change of government.
I want to ask you, as the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, about the story that's on the front page of the Times today about people representing British Gas literally breaking into the homes of vulnerable to put in these prepayment meters. There's a video on their website this morning where this guy says that he basically gets a kick out of doing it. What on earth's going on there?
It's horrific. What the Times has done with this investigation is lift a lid, not just on a series of immoral practices, but a rotten culture behind it, where people were being encouraged to go into the homes of elderly people, of people with disabilities, of families with children, force these prepayment meters and get bonuses for doing so. I think it's right that British Gas has suspended this practice. I think this practice should be suspended across the board, but we need wider action to deal with the scandal of prepayment meters. It cannot be right that people on prepayment meters, some of the poorest people in our country, pay more for their energy costs than people on direct debits. We believe that that price has to come down, and we want a moratorium on these practices of fitting prepayment meters forcibly in people's homes until we've sorted out the wider problems and make sure that poorer people pay a fair price for their energy.
Interest rates likely to go up again today. As a result, we'll see mortgage rates go up too. What's your advice for people who are struggling?
Well, first advice is to put pressure on the government put pressure on your local Conservative MP, if you have one, to try and expand the windfall tax. If we close the loopholes in the windfall tax, Shell today announcing record profits again, we could get help to people now, because it's not just that interest rates are going up and then potentially people's mortgages again. It's that the energy price cap is going to be increased in April, and people will find themselves paying far more in energy costs at a time when they can barely afford it already. We need a government that will make fairer choices in this country. When you've got organisations, institutions that are making record profits, we ought to be sharing the distribution of those profits far more widely in order to get help to people now. That's what we would do in government, and that's what we're urging the government to do.
It's obviously a challenge for plenty of people, not least those who are going on strike at the moment. We saw 500,000 workers on strike earlier on this week. Spoke to the former head of the NHS earlier today. He says that nurses should be a special case. Do you think they should?
Well, I think nurses are incredibly special and incredibly valued by most people in this country. But I think it's undeniable that there are problems across the board. There are people in many, many lines of work, including teachers that we've seen this week, paramedics as well, who are really, really struggling with the cost of living. They've done everything that they can to hang on to our children, to hang on to our patients, to keep us going. They've been a lifeline over the last few years. But increasingly, they're voting with their feet. We've got shortages across social care. We've got shortages in our schools. We're not recruiting enough teachers. We're not retaining enough teachers. And we're seeing the same in the National Health Service as well. In the interests of people in this country, the government has got to get a grip on this across the board. It cannot be in the interests of children to have record numbers of teacher shortages.
Let's talk about Boris Johnson. He says you are out of your mind if you think he covered up lockdown parties. Are you out of your mind?
Is anyone listening to Boris Johnson anymore? I don't care what Boris Johnson is saying in his latest desperate bid to grab headlines. I think people in this country and Conservative MPs made up their minds quite a long time ago about Boris Johnson. He made the rules, he broke the rules, he lied about it, and he laughed about it. He was completely unfit to hold office, and the fact that he was able to attain the highest office in the land is a real scar on the conscience of the Tory party. Those Tory MPs knew him, they knew him well, they knew his record, and yet they still put him in office and continued to defend him for a long time, even as that damage was done to the country.
Yes, I just want to go back to the bullying thing. Didn't want to just focus on that at the top all the way through, but we've seen your boss criticising Rishi Sunak for not suspending Dominic Raab, but we heard Mr Sunak at PMQs yesterday saying that a member of your own party, Rosie Duffield, said that being in the Labour Party is like being in an abusive relationship. So that, potentially double standards there.
Well, we take women's safety and security very seriously. There was an incident in Parliament recently where Rosie Duffield was heckled by Tory and Labour MPs, but Labour MPs we take very seriously because they're in our own party. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to have people being shouted down in Parliament, and I'm very happy to say so and to make that clear, both in public on your show, Kay, but also in private as well to my colleagues, which I have done in the past and I will continue to do. But I don't accept that Labour doesn't treat women properly, that we don't take women's issues seriously. We're the party that's pioneered reforms from when we were in government through the work of people like Tessa Jowell with Sure Start, which was a lifeline for a lot of young mums in this country, all the way through to the fact that we, Harriet Harman and the work that she's done over many decades to get better representation in Parliament has meant that people like me are sitting here talking to you today. We'll never give up on the fight for women's equality, but I don't accept that Labour is not a party that stands up for women. I think our record shows otherwise.
OK, always good to talk to you. Thanks for battling that traffic for us.